Hello, everybody. We've got yet another episode today of This Week in Supervision. And it's funny because as I was trying to get things together, I wasn't really settled with of how I wanted to present it. And I'm trying to take less time to prep because believe it or not, speaking about the subject today, perfectionism. And what's the cause of perfectionism? What do we need to look for if we're treating individuals with perfectionism? Is perfectionism a good or a bad thing? That's what we're going to be talking about today with This Week in Supervision. But I was just thinking about that. Sometimes I'm taking an hour just to prep to do this, something that I've been talking about all week. And so we're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism, what we need to do about it. And I just decided, and I've been doing that more, that we're just gonna let it fly. I don't even know what I'm gonna say when the camera comes on. I got my notes. Let's just go, because perfectionism can be paralyzing. Well, I wanted to talk to you all today about a few things, and the subjects that we talk about are generally to help, and I'll smile it again, because if you're a perfectionist, you won't do this sometimes. Well, no, that's not true. Some perfectionists won't allow themselves to be able to be in situations like this because they feel that everything has to be perfect. And the intervention that I use for myself is that, hey, when I'm doing a live, look, on a live, it's like everything has to be perfect or you screw up, right? And you don't get to take it back, and then you can take it down and you can edit it. And then who wants to do all that stuff? And this is why people end up quitting and not doing anything, right? But even with a live, you have to learn that. And one of the techniques that I want to share that I use is that, you know what? Accept that some things are going to be screwed up. Some things aren't going to be perfect. Some people aren't going to want to watch because they want things done or they want to hear things a certain way. Some people don't mind and they just focus on the content. These are the things that we have to work with ourselves as clinicians, but also with those who we are working with in counseling and psychotherapy. And so this was a subject that kind of piggybacks on the subject that we covered last week, but I better get into it talking about perfectionism, because I'm trying not to be all day and I'm kind of long-winded, but that's what we're going to get into. And we do this to help out individuals who are trying to build their skills in clinical practice, but we also do it because I get a lot of questions from people that have gone through our group, our supervisor training, and they're saying, hey, what is it that, what do I need to do? How do I set up topics to talk about? And they've got questions about things that they can talk about and present. And due to perfectionism, a lot of times are unable to move forward because they don't realize that, it's really kind of more simple than what we make it. If you watch Troy, he's not really talking about nothing and he gets it done, and I can do that too. So that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. And I'm also here to let you all know about the social work supervisor training that we have coming up on September the 25th and the 26th of this month. Come and join us if you may, and learn about how to be a clinical supervisor. I've been hearing that applications have been just off the charts coming in through the state for people who are needing supervision. So this is a great opportunity to get in. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But let's go on and get into the subject because we're already pressed for time. All right, so perfectionism. So generally, I like to start out a little bit talking about, if I'm bringing a subject like this, I like to start off with just the subject and say, hey, you know what? This is what we're talking about today is perfectionism, but I kind of like to tie it into scenarios. I like to ask challenging questions, as y'all know. And so that's what we got into this week. We just got out of a supervision session. And one of the things I started off was challenging the group on defining what perfectionism is. And so we let the group share, and that's a way to pull them in. Once they're in, then they're participating, not feeling like you're just preaching to them, and that's the way you want the group to be able to kind of carry itself, and you just kind of guide it. Right. You want to carry this, and that makes it the most fun and that for everybody. in my opinion. So I had them to define it. And so I used the APA definition to kind of bring it home. And it says perfectionism is the tendency to demand of others or oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance above and beyond what is required in the situation. So in other words, the perfectionist is doing way more than what is even necessary in the situation. Like when I start trying to run my business, I realized that the perfectionistic tendencies that I had was not going to work. I recognized that, you're spending so much time on one assignment when you can be completing 7 or 8 assignments that you would consider to be 80s instead of in the 90s or 100%. Because I recognize for a perfectionist, your 80%, what you rate as 80%, to everybody else, they're looking at it as 90 or 100, right? And so sometimes you have to help your clients to understand that they may need to just sacrifice. When people call me and they say, hey, well, I'm concerned about this and I don't know if I'm ready, and I'm just super concerned about being able to present as a supervisor. When I hear certain words and in a certain way about the way people express themselves about it, it clues into me that, what sounds like you're a perfectionist. And if you're a perfectionist, you don't have a problem. You know why? Because you're going to figure it out. That's the way perfectionists work, because they're not going to put something out that's not a great product. And so really perfectionists don't have a lot to worry about because they're going to do the research. But sometimes we take it too far. So one of the things that I pointed out, and I gotta go. All right. One of the things that we pointed out, I asked the question, what are some dysfunctional ways that perfectionists show up? So again, we're engaging the group. What's some dysfunctional ways that perfectionists showed up? And one of the things that we talked about is that they're setting unreasonable standards. They're having negative comparisons with others. There was one on here that stood out that I wanted to stress, but a lot of times perfectionists have a reluctance to ask for help. And you know what that means? That they won't necessarily delegate when it's needed. Okay. So we don't want to just speculate about a perfectionist if you're trying to treat a perfectionist, or if you trying to learn more about how to treat a perfectionist. We don't want to speculate, but we do want to kind of, in a sense, know or have an idea of what's in the family of perfectionism. What do I mean? What's in the family of perfectionism? When you think about perfectionism, what also comes to mind? And as a clinician, we have to know certain things that line up with perfectionism. Some of you I wouldn't even recognize, and this is something that just came to my mind when I was prepping for supervision earlier in the week. I started thinking like, wow, it seems like there's a link with perfectionism and ADHD. And you know what? I looked up some stuff and it looks like it's some studies that are showing that perfectionism is definitely linked with ADHD, which is something interesting to study. I want to get too far off topic. So one of the things I wanted to ask too, which is important if you're doing assessment and someone comes to you and say that you haven't, and this was a question I asked, if you were notified that you would be seeing a client who had perfectionist tendencies, what would be a few things that you might want to rule out concerning this client? What's some things that you might want to rule out? See, you want to have at the top of mind some of the things that you might want to talk about if you have a client that has this concern. And some of you all might be saying, but Choya, man, I don't have any data on this person. I don't have, and if you've been watching me, I'm a firm believer that we should be able to have an idea about what we're doing with very little information. So in other words, if I mention the word perfectionism to you, there should already be things trickling into your mind about the possibilities of the circumstances and the feelings and the situations and experiences that this person is facing. And I'll give an example of that. So what do individuals with perfectionist tendencies often experience? This is what we want to think. What do they experience? What have they been experiencing? I need to know this. And so what I had the group to do is answer those questions. I asked them if they were notified that they were going to see a perfectionist client. What comes to mind? What are some of the things that they experience, right? To just kind of challenge, like, how much do you know about perfectionism? Well, as we learn, we add to the list. And so what I had with each supervisee they documented. I gave them a couple minutes to document that, and they all shared with me, and with some compelling things that they shared. I also made a list for myself to challenge, and maybe you can make a list now. Like, if this was the situation, when you think about perfectionism, what comes to mind? What are you likely going to be dealing with if you're working with a perfectionistic person? Can you get in the ballpark on that just randomly? And it was interesting because some of the things I wrote down, they were all kind of aligning with some of the situations and scenarios that some of the supervisees brought from having experience with working with perfectionists. One of the things that I wrote down was self-worth. I'm going to have to evaluate what's your level of self-worth, because there is sometimes a link with perfectionism and self-worth, views towards failure. Perfectionists don't want to fail. Okay. As a matter of fact, many times perfectionists are also very competitive. So that's something that you have to look at, that you want to keep at the top of mind and kind of rule out, like, is your client experiencing some of these things? This is another one. Well, does your client have a history of anxiety? Because anxiety, perfectionism, even the OCD. Now we're seeing some things with ADHD, maybe possibly as well. How much do they align? What is the history of the perfectionism with this person? Now we're going more psychoanalytic sometimes. Like, what's the history of that? As a matter of fact, one of the supervisees mentioned that they had an experience with a client who made really good money, and they had a fear. Check this out. How does perfectionism align with abandonment? That's random, right? Perfectionist, a perfectionist. How can perfectionism align with abandonment? The thing is, you don't have to know the answer to that question, but you need to be able to process it with a client. And it turned out that the supervisee had a situation with a client who was having perfectionist tendencies, but it was rooted in this question about the history of perfectionism. When did it start? Well, it started because possibly the person had the need or felt the need to please those people who were around them. So when they got rich and started making a lot of money, they were starting to question, are the people that are close to me with my family, are they really close to me because they love me and they support me, or are they close to me because of what I have? And sometimes that reality of processing the perfectionism, but not just the perfectionism on the surface level, but where it came from, can be quite compelling. And you have to prepare your client to walk through that if they're bringing that into the office. Okay. Also, rigidity. How rigid is this person? Because perfectionists have a tendency to be rigid. They have a need to control, they have a history of being in control. Anger is connected with that as well. Intolerance, impatience, history of panic attacks. Some, I want to rule that out. Anyway, I don't know where my time is, but I think I've gone too far already. So what we did too is ask some questions, and I'm going to share this real quick if I can. I like to ask questions. What is the primary? We had a case. Okay, we had a case, and I don't have time to show the case, but it was a case with this guy. We don't have time to show that. Okay, let me stop the share. Let me see if I can get a little bit of it. But it was a guy, and this is really good because you want to help them to sharpen up their skills. And in the vignette, John is this one's going to be long, a 35-year-old man who's been struggling with perfectionism for most of his life. The perfectionism has started causing significant issues in various areas of his life, including his social, occupational, interpersonal concerns. That's when we know we have a problem. And John is often overwhelmed with the fear of making mistakes and frequently revisits his tasks to ensure that they are flawless. He finds it challenging to delegate tasks. Let me go and share this. All right. Okay. He finds it. Where am I? He finds it challenging to delegate tasks to others because he believes that only he can do them perfectly. He also avoids social gatherings and new opportunities due to the fear of criticism and judgment. So that's becoming more of a problem there, and can be leading into something when we start avoiding people. John's relentless pursuit of perfection has led to high levels of stress, anxiety affecting his overall well-being. He exhibits symptoms of restlessness, irritability, tensions, and difficulty concentrating. So what the question here is, what is the primary issue that's affecting John? And so we did a multiple choice on this. And of course, the answer was generalized anxiety disorder. Now, what I like to do to try to help my clients, my supervisees, to be able to retain the information is use mnemonics. So the mnemonic that I use to help them be able to remember and recall the symptoms of anxiety is called "and I see rest." Now, watch me try to recall that in front of you live perfectly. Okay, so and A stands for pretty much anxiety, I think, and N is a no control of worry. Okay, and this is straight DSM. D is the duration. It has to be how long if it's a generalized anxiety disorder, 6 months. D and I, irritability. Okay, for I. C, concentration, having issues with concentration. These are symptoms of anxiety. R, restlessness. E, energy. S, sleep, some sleep issues. And then T, muscular tension. Man, I got it. And so that's what you're trying to do, is trying to teach your supervisees. Also, you need to have this in mind when you're assessing your clients, and it helps you to be able to make firm diagnosis. And you would be able to know that this person had all these symptoms were right here. So this would be the likely answer for this question. So we had a few other things that we got into as well, which we don't have time to share. I've been trying to integrate the theory into the practice. So asking them, like, based on cognitive theory, how would you have intervened with John in this scenario? But we don't have time. I think I've gone way over, but we'll work on that 1 year. All right, y'all take care. I hope this has been good. Hope to see y'all next week on This Week in Supervision. All right, y'all take care. Bye-bye.